So the Sacramento Kings have officially fired Luke Walton, who was in the middle of his third year as the head coach of the Sacramento Kings. They were 6-11. They had just lost 7 of their 8 games in the NBA, some of which had come to teams that were seated a little bit below them right now in the Western Conference. And this isn't a very good Sacramento Kings team this year. And Luke Walton, of course, this was his third year. He had back-to-back 31-win seasons for the Kings. This one got off to a slow start. So management just decided, you know what, we're going to part ways. But to me, this is the type of firing that illustrates the mindset of the NBA, and it mirrors the mindsets of a lot of NCAA programs as well. And this is actually a major crisis, I think, that is beleaguering both the NBA and the NCAA when it comes to NBA franchises and NCAA programs. And those are inflated expectations. Right now, what we are seeing across NBA franchises and across NCAA programs are inflated expectations and inflated views of programs and franchises' rosters, their entire team personnel, and the expectations that they have for those teams and what they believe those teams can accomplish. We just saw Florida fire Dan Mullins yesterday or 2 days ago after he led Florida to the SEC championship game last year. Now, is Luke Walton, as we shift it back to the NBA, is Luke Walton an elite NBA coach? No, he's not an elite NBA coach. We all know that he built his entire head coaching equity and legacy off of that half a season in the 2015-2016 year with the Warriors, where he led them to a 39 or coached them to a 39-4 start to that campaign before Steve Kerr came back and led them ultimately to that 73-9 season. So that was the entire credibility that Luke Walton had. Obviously, that was a job that landed him the Lakers gig, in which he ultimately went 98-148 during his tenure. In fact, as an overall head coach, and he's been a head coach for now 5 1/4 seasons, he's had a losing record as a head coach every single year. Overall, 166-241 as a head coach. So obviously that record isn't good. Now, in fairness to the Lakers, he's a former Laker. They thought perhaps he is a younger guy. Perhaps he could mesh well with the younger core that they had at the time of Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Kyle Kuzma. Didn't pan out at the time when the Lakers fired him. They thought it was a little bit people thought maybe it was a little bit premature. And the Kings jumped right on top of it. And they saw a precocious young coach and said, hey, listen, we think that he can still cultivate a culture and develop these younger players with the Kings, De'Aaron Fox, Buddy Hield, that little group of theirs, and maybe they can go on a run. Obviously, that didn't work. And as a coach of the Kings, he was 68-93. But again, he's still a very young head coach. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if another NBA team scoops him up, or at the very least he becomes an assistant coach or on the bench of another team. But this is the problem, and the Sacramento Kings epitomize this issue. Is the Sacramento Kings epitomize mediocrity in the NBA. They're kind of in this state of purgatory that I would say is almost worse than the Portland Trailblazers, who at least make the postseason every year. The Sacramento Kings, quite frankly, don't have a very good roster. So am I going to put the entire onus on Luke Walton for his inability to inspire the Sacramento Kings? No. Granted, whether or not you think he's a good coach or not, if you look objectively at this roster for the Sacramento Kings, no one in their right mind is going to say, oh yeah, this is a definitive playoff team necessarily. I think that they have a lot of B and C caliber players. They have one all-star, or at least borderline all-star, in De'Aaron Fox, who I really like. I like Buddy Hield. I do. I love Davion Mitchell. He's a rookie. I like Harrison Barnes. He's a good player. Tyrese Halliburton. is a second-year player that is playing nicely. But outside of that, you're looking at this roster, and it's got Lewis King and Chimezie Metu and Rashawn Holmes and Terrence Davis. And Marvin Bagley just hasn't panned out for the Kings right now. Sure, he's got the talent, maybe, but we haven't seen it executed. This is the team that we're dealing with here. So what do you expect Luke Walton to do with the Sacramento Kings? And again, Mo Harkless is on the team. This roster is not a playoff roster. This isn't a playoff team. And the fact that the Kings, again, whether or not you think Luke Walton is the perfect coach, who cares? At this point, it's a moot point. The fact is, was the firing deserving? I don't know, maybe, but I don't think the roster would have complimented either coach that they can bring in. And I'll touch on Alvin Gentry, who he was placed the interim head coach, great coach. I don't think, and he'll probably earn the permanent gig, given he's a great head coach. And I thought it was a mistake for the Pelicans to fire him. I thought he was starting to do a nice job turning around that franchise. But you look at the Kings, they're the 12th seed in the Western Conference right now. And the only team that is ranked above them, that is seated above them, is the Oklahoma City Thunder. That's the only team where you look at their roster and you compare them and you say, okay, yeah, the Kings have more talent than the Oklahoma City Thunder. I would agree with that. But the 10 other teams that are ahead of both OKC and the Sacramento Kings, the Kings don't have a better roster than them. And to be honest, the New Orleans Pelicans actually are seated below the Sacramento Kings. And when Zion is healthy and he returns, I think they'll have a better roster than the Sacramento Kings. So even the Spurs are right now below the Sacramento Kings. You could argue the Spurs have more talent than the Sacramento Kings. Maybe not. It's a toss-up. Regardless, and it all comes back to the inflated expectations that executives, that owners have for their teams. Now, granted, part of the reason why they've had so much success probably in business and in other outside ventures is because of those inflated expectations that their businesses will work and their ventures will work. But this is different. Again, you can't buy championship teams. Do you have the talent? And right now, the Kings just simply don't have the talent. And I feel badly for Alvin Gentry. I'm happy for him that he'll probably land this head coaching job. He's deserving to be a head coach in the NBA. But this is just going to be another stop. And I'm sure that in 2 or 3 years, they're going to probably let him go because he's going to have a similar record. And I don't view this Kings roster like I did the Warriors back in the Mark Jackson days, where he was consistently kind of leading the Warriors to a 6th and a 7th seed. And then you make one change, you make one hiring change, you bring in Steve Kerr, and all of a sudden he's able to unlock this new confidence and new potential in Steph that just elevates this team to exceedingly high levels. I don't see the same type of scenario happening with the Sacramento Kings and De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield and Harrison Barnes, and that being the core. Again, I love De'Aaron Fox, tons of respect for him. I love Davion Mitchell. I think he's going to be a tremendous player out of Baylor. He's a rookie, though. He needs time to develop. So I just think that it's a big problem right now, and it's a pervasive issue that we're seeing across both the NBA and the NCAA level. I mean, the Sacramento Kings have had the longest active playoff drought in the NBA. They haven't made the playoffs since 2006 when Rick Adelman was the coach. In fact, they've had 10 in those 15 years. The Kings have had 10 different head coaches in that time span. Alvin Gentry is going to be the 11th. Again, Rick Adelman was the last time. R.I.P. God bless his soul. Was the last Kings head coach to lead them to the playoffs. So the bottom line is, Alvin Gentry's not going to lead this team all by his lonesome. They just need more talent. And the simple fact is the Sacramento Kings just don't have enough talent. And it comes down to that. It's as simple as that. They just don't. That's the bottom line. All right, final topic. My Oh, realized I had the LeBron James ticker on there. So apologies for that. Meant to have this ticker down there. Sacramento Kings, whatever. It happens. What are you going to do?